Okay, so they originally came in sort of with their original brief to provide education and training.
Correct.
And then, for some reason, it extended into consultancy services and subject matter expertise.
Yes.
Okay.
Is there
All right.
documentation to that effect discovered during the audit?
So why the scope creep?
On page 22 of our report, there's an outline of the establishment of ICCPM to give some context,
Okay.
including its constitution is there.
So with the, just going back to the strategic partnership, you didn't tender for the strategic partnership, you just basically entered into this agreement
Yeah.
for ICCPM to originally provide education services.
Yeah, so just to give you some background to the sort of the timelines on how that evolved, our original engagement with ICCPM was in about 2010 when the One Sky program first evolved, coming through in setting up to put out a request for information to the market. As that went on, in combining up and doing a joint procurement with Defence in early 2012, ICCPM was engaged to do a critical review of how the project was set up. In that, with discussion of Defence and through their processes, it was determined that Airservices would become the lead agency for the procurement and do it on behalf of the Department of Defence. In making that decision, it was determined that we needed to supplement capability within the organisation, and at that stage there was the development of a strategic partnership, and if I remember correctly, that was, from my understanding, negotiated and formed from about November 2012 and then established in May 2013, but it was done in negotiation with ICCPM. It didn't go out to a competitive tender.
Okay. Now you mentioned the fact that you felt that ICCPM had the expertise that you were looking for. How did you know that? I mean, did you do an assessment of the market to see who was out there in terms of who else had expertise in this area, or did you just take their word for it?
At that time, in hindsight, we should have gone out to the market, but it said that because we had a relationship with ICCPM and we were forming up with the Department of Defence to do this procurement, and they had extensive expertise in defence procurement practices, processes and complex management expertise, it was, I'll call it, naturally assumed that they were the best people.
Because they were set up as an education and training outfit.
Yes.
And then they were brought in with all these consultancy services.
Correct.
Okay, so in terms of, so I suppose the question that I had while I was scratching my head when I read this report is, why didn't you go to panel? It's not as if Defence doesn't have, well, every government agency doesn't have extensive panels. So not only did you not do a market assessment of the expertise, but you also didn't even bother to go to panels, particularly defence panels that would have had the potentially the expertise in this area. Knowing the diversity of those panels, I'm sure it did. So why didn't you actually think about going to panels?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
Is there not the expertise in the department, in the agency, that to have the sense to go to a panel?
Senator, I don't know what that decision made. Sorry, I apologise, Senator. I am unaware of the decision making at that particular stage, or the decision whether ICCPM or not go to the panels. Our procurement framework at the time would allow and would should have gone down that path, particularly in hindsight when we look at it. That's the way it should have been done. But why those decisions were made and went down that path, I can't answer.
So just finally, Chair, just in terms of the documentation that says that ICCPM were the outfit to go to, what sort of documentation do you have on that? Is there a good paper trail on that, on why they weren't chosen? Given again, and I'll just come back to my original point, they did come in as the education on an education and training brief, and then as my colleagues has mentioned, the scope has crept significantly into the multi-millions. 9 million.
As articulated in the audit report, our documentation trail is one of the things that is a significant finding, or the lack of, particularly around the formation of the strategic partnership, which I'll call it was the flawed construct that then everything else was then based on, and the decisions were based on, and the documentation around that and the decision making is actually one of the areas that gets pointed out in the report that is a significant deficiency.
So
Just one final question, please. So how did it work? Did ICCPM pitch for the work, or did Airservices identify the gaps and approach ICCPM?
It depends on before when getting into realising the capability deficiencies we would have in the organisation, what we would require for this particular program. We identified. I am unaware of whether ICCPM pitched that to move into the strategic partnership space. I can't answer that. But post the strategic partnership, there was the fact that premise that there was a strategic partnership that we could draw down and go to them to get expertise and what capability required at whatever time. That was Airservices going.
So it
ICCPM.
wasn't them. It wasn't ICCPM coming. Okay, we've got the education and training brief. That job's done, and now you need expertise in other areas. ICCPM didn't pitch, so basically saying these are your gaps, and we've got that expertise. Airservices had identified those gaps, and so you approached ICCPM.
So once the strategic partnership had been formed, regardless of the flawed construct of it, post that, when we needed a certain capability, we would go to ICCPM and ask them to source
so you
that
went to them.
capability.
Okay.
Yes. Where the ICCPM did the pitch for the strategic partnership to say this is what we could ask for, I'm unaware.
Okay, so, but how do you know that happened, that Airservices went to ICCPM rather than ICCPM pitching for these, to fill these gaps, if you don't have any documentation?
There is documentation about going and asking for quotes from ICCPM for some of these pieces. This was the documentation around some of the determinations around value for money for some of those capabilities, as well as the documentation around the setting up of the strategic partnership.
You said, I think, in your earlier statements that someone from Defence told you to go to them. Who was that person?
I'm not sure, because this is back in 2010, but there are interactions with Defence because a number of the capabilities that we required from ICCPM were joint decisions, so to speak, on certain roles, being a joint program, some of the key personnel that are required.
So you said that Defence told you to go to them, but you don't actually know how or when or any reason.
This is in 2010, and I just don't know what the interactions at that time and what the discussions were with the then CEO, etc.
So it's just kind of corporate legend.
It's been something, a relationship that has evolved since 2010, and that's actually because of one of the issues around that lack of documentation means that it becomes folklore rather than actual understanding what the arrangements are.
It's very matey. I mean, given it's evolved over a number of years, have you or any of the senior people been socialising with these people? I mean, it sounds very kind of, let's have a drink, let's do some more work together, let's keep it going.
There would be the normal interactions with people working closely together through a long period of time, that there would be interactions, yes.
Right, that's perhaps worth pursuing.
Thank you.